Amanda from Pontes Books, here with the current event for Chapter 11 of The Prince and the Pauper. And today we are diving into something that is related to an act that Tom, who they believe is actually Edward, when at the very end of Chapter 11, spoiler alert, becomes the king. And his very first act is essentially a pardon. He pardons the Duke of Norfolk, and we'll look at that in just a moment. But so today our current event is focusing on kind of more recent presidential pardons. So we're looking at what sort of pardons have been made and looking a little bit back over time, but mostly just at some recent ones. So in The Prince and the Pauper, we see this at the end of Chapter 11. Tom responded in a strong, earnest voice and with great animation. Then shall the king's law be a law of mercy from this day, and never more be a law of blood. Up from thy knees and away to the tower, and say the king decrees the Duke of Norfolk shall not die. So this had been something that had been bothering Tom, was the fact that this Duke of Norfolk was sentenced to death, and seemingly him being the cause of it is what it kind of like felt like to him, or at least why it was moved up so much. So his first act was to pardon him, to set him free, make him an innocent man. So in the US, and this is what I'm focusing on kind of specifically, is just the US's power. So in the United States Constitution, the president is given the power to pardon people. So it's technically in Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1, apparently, if you know your Constitution well. So it says in there that the president shall have power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. So this can only be issued for federal crimes. So it can't be anything that is, through a certain state or anything like that. It has to be federal crimes because the Constitution says offenses against the United States. And then there's actually 5 different types of pardons that can be issued. So there's a full pardon, there's amnesty, commutation, they can remit fines or forfeitures, and issue a reprieve. So most often we look at full pardons or what's called clemency, which is kind of like reducing the sentence. So those are the ones that we'll kind of be looking at today. So pardons for President Obama. So again, trying to look at some of our recent ones. So in 2016, on December 19th, President Barack Obama pardoned 78 people and then also shortened the sentences of 153 others. So this was the highest number of individual clemencies that were granted in one day, meaning, again, making that punishment less harsh. And I believe that is still true because when we look at President Trump, his numbers are slightly smaller that he had on the day that we focused on, but I'm not exactly positive. But I think this is still the most clemencies in one day. And those were focused mostly on shortening sentences for those in prison for drug crimes. So there was a lot of legislation that President Obama was trying to pass while he was in office regarding prison sentences and the number of people, that was one of the goals, but there weren't able to come to any decisions based on, differing opinions in Congress. So as a result, he granted these pardons as kind of, as he saw it, kind of a last resort to do what he could. So then we can look at some of the pardons from President Trump. And again, neither of these are a comprehensive list of all of the pardons. It's just kind of zooming in on specific days, kind of some current events that made the headlines. So President Donald Trump pardoned 74 people. And then one was less than an hour before President Joe Biden was sworn in. And there were also a number that were granted clemency for that time as well. So some of those just included Stephen Bannon, who is a former White House chief strategist. And so he was accused of wire fraud and money laundering. And then Lil Wayne, always just one that people might have heard of. So he's a rapper as well. And he had been accused of a federal weapons charge. So those were some of the ones that were on that list, but it was a long list with a lot of different type of sentences. So if we take a look kind of more long-term, I guess you could say, and look at the clemency statistics by president, we can see they're not really listed chronologically, but it does have President Trump at the top because he was the most recent. You can kind of see by the numbers, the total number, total clemency, and then the total requests and requests granted. So if you look at the clemency numbers, it looks like FDR is the highest ranking. So even though, like I said, President Obama had the most in one day, that isn't necessarily the most over time. So you can just kind of see the breakdown of the numbers there. And I think there was a lot of talk about President Trump having a lot of these, but I think it's just that they all came toward the end, or most of them came toward the end of his presidency. So that's why it made some headlines. So very interesting just to take a look at this. Hopefully you learned something. Have a good rest of your day.